This is The First Century, a podcast devoted to stories from that influential period of history, including Rome, Judea, Christianity, and more. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Schmisek. Get ready to go back in time and enter a world before computers, the stagecoach, the printing press, or even stirrups had been invented for horses. We're about to enter the first century. Episode 40. Messalina's power increases. We heard in episode 38 how Messalina had eliminated a perceived potential adversary, Julia Livia, Claudius's niece. Julia Livia had been exiled and then died of starvation. Now, Messalina continued to be on the lookout for potential rivals, and she took an interest in Julia Livia, daughter of Drusus and Livia, the same Livia who had surreptitiously killed her husband Drusus to marry her lover Silanus. As we've discussed before, Livia was executed in about 31, shortly after Silanus's downfall. The Senate had proclaimed her damnatio memoriae, but her daughter, Julia Livia, born in 7 CE, was now about 36 years old and was niece of Claudius from a different side of the family, but still a member of the imperial family. Messalina believed that Julia Livia's son could be a rival, even though Julia's husband, the boy's father, an equestrian, had already died. Messalina enlisted the senator Rufus to accuse Julia Livia of immoral conduct. Julia was not allowed to have an advocate, and therefore judgment was swift. Claudius ordered her beheaded. Julia's son, now a 10-year-old orphan, Plautus, was allowed to live as he was no longer considered a threat without his mother as a potential advocate. Pomponia Graecina, wife of the general Aulus Plautius, went into public mourning, a state she would embrace for the next 40 years. Back in Judea, King Agrippa removed Simon Canthorus from the high priesthood and offered it again to Jonathan, son of Annas, acknowledging him as more deserving of the office. Yet Jonathan declined the appointment and addressed Herod Agrippa with the following words: "O king, I am grateful for the honor you show me, and I deeply appreciate your willingness to bestow such a distinction out of your own goodwill. Yet God has judged me unworthy of the high priesthood. I am content with having once worn the sacred garments, for I did so in a holier spirit than I could now. If you desire that someone more worthy than I should hold this honorable office, permit me to name such a person. I have a brother who is free from all sin against God and without offense toward you. I commend him to you as one fit for this sacred duty." Herod Agrippa was pleased with Jonathan's words, and, honoring his request, passed him over and appointed his brother Matthias as high priest. Herod Agrippa was feeling confident in his role as king, especially since Claudius himself had performed that ceremony in Rome, and he had worked so successfully with Petronius. But now Petronius had been replaced by Marsus, and Herod Agrippa, fueled by his own confidence, thought it would be a good idea to expand and heighten the walls of Jerusalem. But this action rightly aroused the suspicion of the new governor, Marsus. So he informed Claudius of the construction project, and the emperor shared these same suspicions. So Claudius ordered Agrippa to cease construction on the walls, which he did. Herod Agrippa was becoming well loved by the people. He spent most of his time in Jerusalem and was sure to be seen following Mosaic law. So he was surprised when one of his officers told him that a certain devout Jew by the name of Simon, which was the most common name at the time, had made a speech in Caesarea Maritima accusing Herod Agrippa of not following the law and having too many Gentile tendencies and proclivities, such as attending the theater and the gymnasium. So Herod Agrippa sent for the man, sat him down next to him in the theater. The king then asked him in a hushed tone, "What is there happening in this theater that is contrary to the Mosaic law?" Simon quickly apologized and begged forgiveness. In an act of clemency, Herod Agrippa forgave him, gave him a small token of a present, and then dismissed him. This, too, made people feel like they had a noble and generous king. Now, despite his physical disabilities, or perhaps shaped by them, Claudius developed a life that diverged from the usual patterns of elite Roman masculinity. Excluded from the athletic, military, and social pursuits expected of boys and young men of his rank, he instead gravitated toward quieter, more private pleasures, including scholarly pursuits and his love of history, having had Livy himself as a tutor, as we heard earlier. But in addition to this, chief among these private pleasures was also gambling. Claudius was an enthusiastic and habitual dice player, so devoted that he even wrote a treatise on the game. His passion accompanied him everywhere. He had a specially designed gaming board fitted into his carriage so that he could play while traveling without the dice scattering spontaneously. He also had a marked fondness for drink, and was known at times to indulge to excess. But perhaps most significant was the environment in which he was raised. Surrounded, tended to, and often dominated by women during his upbringing, Claudius grew into an adult who was not only comfortable in their company, but deeply drawn to it. Unlike many aristocratic Roman men whose sexual lives could span both male and female partners, Claudius was firmly heterosexual. This aspect of his character did not escape his wife, Messalina. Astute and manipulative, she managed her husband in part by indulging these inclinations, ensuring that he was supplied with women in her absence, along with ample wine and gaming to sustain his appetites. In doing so, she maintained both his contentment and her own freedom of action. For example, Messalina's father had passed away in the first few months of Claudius's reign. Messalina's mother, Domitia Lepida, then married Appius Silanus, who had served as consul in 28. Appius was recalled from his role as governor of Hispania for the marriage. Messalina had become enchanted with Silanus, her new stepfather, and she even attempted to seduce him. For his part, Appius was happy with his new wife and rejected the advances of his stepdaughter. Not content with this rejection, Messalina, conspiring with Narcissus, Claudius's secretary, arranged to take vengeance on Appius Silanus. Messalina knew that, like many Romans, Claudius was susceptible to omens, portents, and dreams. For example, Messalina was aware that there was a man who came to Claudius one morning to say, "In my dreams last night you were murdered. I would recognize the assailant if I ever saw him." The princeps was terrified but grateful. He allowed the man to keep watch, until later that morning the man called out, "Look, there he is, submitting a petition." Claudius immediately had the man arrested and executed. Claudius did not even know or suspect that the two were involved in a legal dispute. Messalina thought that she and Narcissus could use Claudius's naivete and gullibility to their advantage, so they made a plan, which worked just as it was designed. Narcissus sent word to Appius Silanus that the princeps wished to see him on a certain morning. On that very morning, before dawn, Narcissus rushed into Claudius's bedroom to say he had just woken from a dream whereby Appius Silanus killed Claudius. Messalina, sleeping next to her husband, turned her head, seemingly startled by the news, to say that she had just had the same dream for the last several nights. At that very moment, they were told that Appius Silanus was attempting to see Claudius. The princeps needed no further proof that these dreams were accurate premonitions. He accused Appius Silanus of murder, had him arrested, and tried in the Senate, while expressing gratitude to Narcissus for his vigilance. Though the Senate tried Appius and found him guilty and had him executed, the tension between emperor and the Senate was becoming more heightened. Many suspected that Messalina was behind the plot, and so senators began to become more circumspect. Messalina's power was growing. Next time, we'll hear more about Christians in Antioch and Claudius's successful invasion of Britannia.